Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. Good evening. Just a quick announcement. If you are with someone or accompanying a friend who would benefit from sign interpretation, then we would please invite them to move towards this side of the audience where we have our interpreter available. That having been said, my name is Dr. Micaela Mares Tamayo. I am the Director of Student Equity here at PCC and an instructor for College One. And so it gives me great honor to welcome you to our signature event, which is Kinship in Practice, an evening of community with Father Greg Boyle. To begin, I also want to respectfully acknowledge the Tongva people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations, and very much welcome our family and community members who are with us this evening. Again, de parte de mí y de nuestra familia aquí en PCC, bienvenidos a los miembros de la comunidad que nos acompañan esta noche. For our College One students, we're particularly excited for you to hear a different interpretation of community and the idea of how one may work with gangs and within community that goes very nicely in concert with what you've been reading in Little Nation by Alejandro Morales. But you're not here to hear me. You're here to hear many other wonderful things this evening. And so one of the people who has particularly wonderful things to say and frankly do here at our college is our Vice President of Student Services, Dr. Cynthia Olivo. So I would like to please welcome her to the stage to give the college welcome.
Hello, students, faculty, staff, and guests. Welcome to Kinship in Practice, an evening with Father Greg Boyle. I know many of you have been reading the book Little Nation and Other Stories by Alejandro Morales, and I've seen your golden lines around campus. How many of you have been reading the book? Raise your hands high so our community members can see. Great. And yesterday I also saw your research posters. And I just want to say congratulations. You are in your first semester of college, and you've already done so much to be actively involved in PCC. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. To share a little bit about my background, I am the first person in my family to go to college, and I was raised by an amazing single mom who made sure that we did everything possible to get the help needed to go to college. And, I'm the third generation born in this country. But in my family, my grandparents were born during an era where they were prohibited by law from full participation in society. And my mother was born in the year that Brown versus Board of Education passed. And so that law changed, but the hearts and minds of people did not catch up to that law. And so tonight, what I'm so proud of is that our program, Pathways, and our course, College One, and our book, the One Book, One College program, what we try and do is create a space for you students to explore these types of issues. So I want to also give our appreciation to all of our College One teachers and our Pathways faculty and staff. Let's give them a round of applause también. And finally, welcome to Father Greg Boyle. And I want to say thank you for helping us focus on how we can be supportive of one another as we amplify ways that this college can help our former incarcerated students, our LGBTQ students, undocumented students, Latinx and Black students, as well as any student who at some point in their life feels like an other. My name is Dr. Cynthia Olivo. I'm the Vice President of Student Services, and I'm here to say on behalf of the President of the college, the Board of Trustees, our faculty, staff, and administration, welcome, you belong. Thank you. And it's my great privilege to introduce to you tonight Dr. Anthony Francoso, a beloved faculty member here from the Department of Sociology and Ethnic Studies, who also serves as a club advisor, which he doesn't have to do. This is something he does because he loves students. He's a club advisor for Third Wave Feminist Club, as well as Homeboy Scholars, and a co-advisor for MECHA. Please help me welcome Dr. Anthony Francoso.
Good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing tonight? For reals, is that all you got? Like, how are you all doing tonight? Okay, first off, right, we are fortunate enough to have with us tonight a man who has put in more work in our communities, in my community, than potentially any other person alive. I know that's a very bold statement to make, but the longevity and scope of this man's work transcends beyond the work of most, and dare do I say, all others. So before we do an introduction of Father Greg Boyle, I want to talk a little bit about logistics. I'm going to give an introduction, then Father Boyle will come out. Father Boyle will speak for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then after Father Boyle is done, there will be a question and answer period. And we ask that each and every one of you stay seated throughout the duration of the event. So please do not leave after Father Boyle does his talk. Also, before I go on, an event like this really could not happen without the support of a number of individuals and campus entities. The campus entities we need to thank are PCC Pathways, Student Equity, and ALE, the Association for Latino Employees. We also want to thank a number of staff, Shayla Rose from Pathways, Yahaira de la Paz from the Career Center, Dr. Michaela Mares Tamayo from Student Equity, Dr. Tony Jouget, Dr. Nicholas Hatch, and of course, Dr. Cynthia Olivo for her love and utmost support. There are a number of students we need to also thank who were key in the organizing of this event. Those students are Alex Martinez, Gabriela Vacareño, Hannah King, and Laura Electa Hayes. Without the help of these students, none of this would have really happened. We also want to give a special shout out to Adrian Caceres, who will be talking or speaking in a minute, because it was Adrian who had the deep connection to Father Boyle to be able to make this event even possible. So, a few words about Father Boyle. Since 1988, Father Greg has been the founder and executive director of Homeboy Industries. With hard work and extreme dedication, Father Greg has built Homeboy Industries into the nation's largest gang intervention, rehab, and re-entry program. He has done this by opening his heart and soul to a community of individuals whom have endured some of the harshest treatment by the very institutions who were born to protect us. Every year, Homeboy Industries welcomes over 10,000 formerly gang-involved and previously incarcerated men and women through their doors, providing these individuals with programming which includes tattoo removal, workforce development, educational services, legal services, mental health, and a solar power installation training program. Homeboy Industries also provides jobs for its population. These jobs include working at Homegirl Cafe, the Homeboy Bakery, the Homeboy Diner at City Hall, Homeboy Silk Screening, the selling of Homeboy Industries merchandise and food at local farmers markets, as well as having an electronics recycling program. Excuse me. Father Greg is also the author of 2 best-selling books, the first being Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion, and more recently, Barking to the Choir, The Power of Radical Kinship. In both books, Father Greg shares his over 30 years of experience. His over 30 years of experience working in our communities, sharing stories of hope, resilience, love, and empowerment. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of hearing Father Greg speak on multiple occasions. The first time was 15 years ago when he spoke to a class I was co-teaching at UCSB when I was getting my PhD. In this class, Father Greg gave one of the most passionate and inspirational talks I have ever seen, and he moved me in ways that I didn't know were possible. Since then, I have been fortunate enough to hear Father Greg speak at numerous engagements. Now, what I have taken from the work of Father Greg is this. When working with previously incarcerated and formerly gang-involved folks, we have to show empathy and unconditional love. We need to show dignity and respect, to actively listen, to be consistent with our care, develop deep ties of solidarity, and most importantly, we need to support folks based upon the ways they feel is most important to them. I've used this understanding of unconditional love and support in multiple situations, and it has actually allowed me to connect with incarcerated students in men's prisons, as well as connect with incarcerated youth in youth detention camps. At the university level, it has allowed me to connect deeply with previous incarcerated and former and current gang youth. By showing consistent love and deep support, I was able to break through their exterior walls to see how beautiful of a person they are on the inside. I also kind of want to share a brief story, if I may. Listening to Father Boyle 15 years ago actually helped me work through some of my own trauma. When I was 8, I moved to East LA, and I quickly made friends with these two knuckleheads that lived next door, whose names were Tommy and Manuel. The three of us, for the next 7 years, caused, I'll just say, ruckus, trouble, and I'm amazed actually that none of the actions we participated in ever stuck with any type of punishment. And I want to bring up the story of Manuel and Tommy for this reason. Shortly after those 7 years, Manuel and Tommy had to move, and they moved deeper into East LA and Boyle Heights. And I didn't see them for about another 5 to 6 years. After the 6th year, I heard that my friend Tommy died in a motorcycle accident. And I didn't reach out to the family. And these two young men were literally my brothers. Then a few years later, I was sitting in a fast food restaurant with my soon-to-be brother-in-law. And these two young men walked in. And they were tattooed up, full arms, neck, face. And I didn't take any notice to them. Well, I did because I saw them, obviously. They saw me, and they approached me, and they said, "Hey, are you Anthony?" My response was, "Yeah, what's up?" And they said, it's us, fool, it's Nikki and Richie. And Nikki and Richie are Tommy and Manuel's cousins. And I say, "Hey, what's going on? Like, how you been? What y'all up to?" And then Richie proceeded to tell me that Manuel was shot in the face by a local, or by another gang set. My initial reaction was to jump up, ask where Manuel was at the hospital, if I could go and see him and see the family and make connections again. But I didn't do that. I said, "I'm really sorry to hear that. Send my love to, Tomas, to his parents." And that was it. And for years, I would kick myself, I would punish myself for not taking the steps to make a reconnection with Manuel before he passed. After that moment, I swore to myself that I would never turn my back on anyone who is in need ever again. But I didn't really know what that looked like. And it wasn't until I heard Father Greg speak at UCSB that I learned what that actually looked like, what unconditional love, what unconditional support, what that really means. Because hearing Father Greg speak about his work in community really gave me heart, really gave me insight, really gave me dedication, really gave me passion to want to continue to move forward. And he gave me tools to use that can empower me to never turn my back on anyone who is in need. So I have mad love for Father Boyle for helping me work through those specific traumas. So, you know, I am just honored and excited about him being here today with all of us at PCC. To conclude, it is this message I hope we all walk away with today, how each and every one of us has the ability to make a difference in someone else's life by being there to listen and give support unconditionally, to help develop their humanity and draw out the best person that that individual can possibly be. So before we hear from Father Boyle, we're actually going to hear from two students at PCC, Jesse Fernandez and Adrian Caceres, and they are going to give kind of insight into what unconditional love and support actually looks like and what happens on a day-to-day basis at Homeboy Industries. So I'm going to give it up to them now.
Hey, how's it going? Damn, I feel like a celebrity. So my name's Jesse Fernandez. I'm 25 years old. I originated in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. That's where I come from. Pretty much growing up, my fondest memories was when I was young, like around 5, 6 years old, because those are the times when my family was really united. But it was not until when I was 10 years old when I lost my mom. A few months after, I lost my second female role model, which was my grandma. So growing up, I didn't really have a stable household. It only consisted of me, my dad, and my brothers. But everybody was always doing their own thing. And I joined the gang. And then from early age, it was just all downhill. I had to learn how to survive. It was not even living. It was just surviving, how to navigate through life, how to move, and just how to get by. In 2015, I always talk about it because 2015 was one of the roughest years of my life. In 2015, in the beginning, I lost one of my best and close friends that I consider a brother to gang violence. In the middle of 2015, I lost a lot of friends that I grew up with to gang violence. In December 2015, I lost a real close friend of mine, another best friend of mine, to gang violence. And that is when I had seen Father Greg in 2015, and I started Homeboy Industries in 2016. And I did everything at Homeboy Industries, maintenance, everything, but this time around I felt like I had to take it serious because I felt like I was the next one that was probably gonna lose my life, because that's what I learned to glorify for a long time. It was either do a life sentence in prison or end up dead in the streets. And yeah, I started there, and I had two goals I wanted to do, was get my driver's license and go to college. I didn't go to college because I didn't know how to do the placement test, financial aid, the classes, and all that. I did know what to do was survive, and that's what I was comfortable at. At Homeboy Industries, they helped me out, and they got me to enroll into PCC. And I passed both of these classes, and they said, you're pretty smart, you just don't have faith in yourself. We're gonna help you out, so you just worry about your school and we'll help out with the financial aid and how to do all that. And so before you know it, I'm going on and doing school. And another goal of mine was trying to get my driver's license. I couldn't get my driver's license because I had about $5,000 in tickets. And at Homeboy Industries, they helped me out. So I eventually got my driver's license, but it was a tough road to get my driver's license. But I ended up getting my driver's license. And I remember when I did good in school, they said, have you ever thought about studying abroad? And I was like, what is that? My first thing was, I don't know if you guys seen the movie Taken, but I thought I was gonna go somewhere and I was gonna get kidnapped. So I was like, I'm cool. I'm from LA. I got tattoos. It's not gonna happen. And through the help of individuals at Homeboy Industries and an individual named Brittany Morton that works at Homeboy Industries, they fundraised and they gathered up $10,000, and they helped it become a reality that I was gonna study abroad in Oxford, England. And it happened. I come from a low-income household where typically these type of things don't happen. Today I could say I went to the Eiffel Tower, I went to see the London Bridge, and I'm not talking about the ones in Las Vegas, I'm talking about the actual ones. And so I gotta do all these things that an individual from my background doesn't get to do. A lot of people try to fight for these things their whole life just to get that opportunity, and I could say I did that. And now what I do at Homeboy Industries, I'm an educational intern, so I help out individuals that are interested in going into college and help out with the application, the financial aid, getting their classes. Also help individuals that are interested in getting their high school diploma or getting their GED. So I help out in that nature, and if they need any support, any mentoring, any advice as far as school-related stuff or any other issues, like I help them out, you know, and that's what I currently do there now. And I'll just end it with this. If I were to ask everybody right now, if you guys wanted this $20 bill, who would say they wanted it? What if I were to fold this $20 bill? Who would want it? What if I would throw it on the floor and step on it? Who would still want this $20 bill? So no matter what, after I crumbled it, I wrapped it around, you guys still wanted this $20 bill because you guys still see the worth of this $20 bill. Homeboy Industries and Father Greg and what they do there, they help me see the worth in myself. That today I'm not what society perceives me to do. I'm a human being, and Homeboy Industries gave me that chance. So thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Adrian Caceres. I'll start off real quick sharing my story. I'm a first-generation college student. So a little bit about my background. I come from a background where I grew up in a domestic violence household setting. You know, from an early age, man, I will see my father inflict violence on my mother, and it got to that point where I would rather get in to take the violence to prevent my mother from getting hit. It got to the point where I was taking the violence from both ends. So eventually, growing up, I became an angry little kid. By the time I was 4 years old, my dad walked out of my life. And from that point forward, you know, my mother was a hardworking mother that she was working all the time to make ends meet. So that love and that attention that I wanted from my mother and that I was seeking from a father that was gone, I was getting it from the streets. So I didn't just join the gang. You know, first I started getting high and I started kicking it with the little kids from the neighborhood. And eventually, you know, the homies started coming around, and that's where I started looking for the love, the empathy, the acceptance that I lacked. So by the time I was 12 years old, I joined the neighborhood, and being part of the neighborhood, I learned that one or two things was gonna happen. I was either gonna become a guppy or I was gonna become a shark. So I decided to become a shark because since a little kid, I was always fending for myself, man. So I became a shark, man. I became a monster. I went from juvenile halls to prison. I never set foot on a regular high school, but every time I was in prison, man, I would always try to read books. I made it my priority to start reading, trying to just seek that homemade education, you know, through books and the dictionary. So I never thought about college, but upon my release from prison, I had already heard about Father Gregory Boyle. I had heard of Father G when I was in juvenile halls. Father G would go to a lot of different juvenile halls, and he would talk, he would share mass, but only when Father G would go to, when he would go to the juvenile halls, when he would go to church, that would be the only weekend that I would go to church just to hear him speak. And every time he would go, I would show up and I would listen to the stories, and that would be the only time I would pay attention. Other than that, I would go to church just to either gangbang or get in fights, because I grew up with all that anger, with all that animosity, with all that hatred. And when I got released from prison in 2013, I got out and I was part of the California hunger strikes. So when I got out, man, I was skinny, I was sucked up. And right away, I didn't went straight to homeboys. Right away, man, I went back to my neighborhood, except this time I went to my neighborhood, I was homeless. I didn't have that support that I needed. I didn't have nowhere to go. And after I hit my personal rock bottom, I talked to my probation officer because I had a warrant. I was already on the run. I had a warrant. I was out scouting. I wasn't checking in because I had already tested dirty. And I called my PO one day and I told her, you know what, like, I'm ready to turn myself in, man. I'm tired. So she told me, look, man, I'm not gonna violate you. I'm not gonna send you to jail, but I'm gonna send you to treatment. And when I went to treatment, I started thinking about all the times when I was a little kid, man, how I had heard about Homeboy Industries. So I took it upon myself. I went to Homeboy Industries, and I remember my first time, you know, I was scared because walking in through the doors, I didn't know what to expect, man. I know that I was gonna come across a bunch of homies and homegirls, and like I said, I was either gonna be the guppy or the shark. So going in with my shark instincts, just ready, just waiting for something to happen, it was a trip because I was met with love, with empathy, with compassion. So I sat there in the lobby, and finally Father G calls me to his office, right? So I'm walking in, and I remember at that time I had tattoos on my face. So at that time, Father G tells me, you know, are you clean? And I told him, yeah, I'm clean. All right. He tells me, so you want a job, huh? And I looked at him and I'm like, yeah, like, I want a job. Mind you, I don't have no skills. I never had a job before. I didn't even know what a resume was. So I remember sitting across the desk from Father G, and he looks at me and he tells me, you'll do anything for me? You'll do anything for your job? And I looked at him and I'm like, yeah, Pops, I'll do anything for a job. And then he tells me, mijo, would you take that tattoo off your face? And I looked at him and I told him, yes, Pops, like, I'll take that tattoo on my face. But all along in the back of my head, I'm thinking, like, I'm gonna bullshit him, like, I'm not gonna get it off because I wasn't ready. That was at a fast pace. You know, we talked about change, but I wasn't ready to jump the gun that fast, you know? So I remember, all right, I'm gonna bullshit Father G, I'm gonna tell him, yeah, but when the time comes to go to my appointment, I'm gonna lag it. So here I am thinking I'm sly, slick. So Father G puts me through the process. I tested clean. He looks at me, tells me, mijo, for tattoo removal, we have a list anywhere from 900 to 1,000 people on a monthly basis. But today's your lucky day. Guess why? And I looked at him and I'm like, why? He was like, because you're up next. And when he told me that, when he shared that with me, my heart just froze, you know? I froze because it was like he was reading through my head. Like, he was just like he was inside my thighs. Here I was thinking I was gonna bullshit him, but I should have known better. You know, Father Greg's been dealing with gang members from the 80s, and I'm forward, right? So here I am thinking I'm slick, and he looked at me, and as we're walking to tattoo removal, he seen that I paused, and then he tells me, "You say you'll do anything, right? You say you'll do anything from me, mijo?" And I say, "Yeah." So from that point forward, man, I had my first session. And from that point forward, man, they helped me with tattoo removal. I got the basic skills as far as like how to do janitorial work. I went through their bakery program where I was able to add more stuff to my resume. And eventually I transitioned to VOA. But all along, when I went to Homeboy Industries, what I loved about Homeboy Industries is that they were loving, they were compassionate. You know, it didn't matter if I was going through the program or anybody was going through the program. You made a mistake, you went back to jail, or you got fired right then and then from your job. Father G, he wouldn't kick you out, man. That's Father G. He strongly believes in restorative justice. What he would do if you would test positive along the way, or you would get fired, he would send you to treatment. If you were serious about your job, he'll hold your job, send you to treatment. By the time you got out of treatment, man, he'll greet you with open arms. He'll never see you less than. So I would always think, here goes this man that's not even part of my family. Not even my own family is loving and compassionate. So why is this stranger so loving, so compassionate, and so empathetic with an individual like myself? And from that point forward, man, like I started working on myself, and it's been a lifelong process. I know that I'm not perfect today, but I know for damn sure I'm not the man that I used to be. You know? And I know that it's gonna be a long process, because like I said, I'm still learning how to take off that mask, learning that I don't always have to be on the defense, learning that I no longer have to be that shark. So with that said, that's a little bit about my story. I want to introduce to the man that has changed thousands of gang members' lives, individuals like ourselves, to Father Gregory Boyle.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be with you, and thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Anthony. You can't bullshit a bullshitter. You know, that's kind of the sort of how that works, I guess. That's the moral of that story. It's the privilege of my life for 30 years to have worked with gang members, and the day will never come when I am more noble or have more courage, or I'm closer to God than those two men who just, they're my heroes. So for 30 years, the homies have taught me so much, and I'm grateful to them. There was a homie named Lewis who was kind of running the place for like 10 years, and a gang member, a shot caller, a heroin addict, and been to prison, and he was kind of a force of nature, and he was also a public speaker, so he was always being called to, because he liked doing that, and schools would ask for him by name, and we went out to dinner, the two of us, and he was giving me tips on how to speak publicly, and he says, you know, you gotta pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. And I said, yeah, no shit, that's good advice there, so. You know, what Martin Luther King says about church could well be said about PCC. It's not the place you've come to, it's the place you will go from, and you go from here to reimagine the world to look differently than it currently looks. Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills correctly when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we Imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. You go from PCC to dismantle the barriers that exclude. That's the whole point. Somehow you want to widen and make more spacious our sense of welcome. And so you go to the margins, and because if you stand at the margins, you look under your feet, the margins are getting erased because you chose to stand there. And you stand in a particular way with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, and you stand with those whose dignity has been denied, and you stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And every once in a while, you get this exquisite privilege, an ability to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. You get to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you go from here to stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And I suspect if kinship and the creation of a community of kinship happened to be our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice, we'd be celebrating it. For no kinship, no peace, no kinship, no justice, no kinship, no equality. And so we're invited to go from this place and to create this place where we stand against forgetting that we belong to each other. And so the homies have taught me everything of value in that pursuit of creating a community of kinship. I know what it looks like because of people like Adrian and Jesse. And the homies have taught me a host of things over the years, but mainly in the last few years, they've taught me how to text, and I'm so grateful to them because I find it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And I'm pretty good at it, you know, LOL and OMG and BTW. And the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh, hell no, which I've been using quite a bit lately. And I know I can't be alone in being vexed by this stupid autocorrect thing, you know, because I had a homegirl named Bertha, a tough cookie, had been to prison and was a tough cookie, and she worked at Homeboy, and on a Sunday she texted me, where you at? So I texted her back, I am about to speak to a room full of monjas, and monjas, you know, is nuns, sisters, religious women. I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas, and I pushed send, and autocorrect told her that I was about to speak to a room full of ninjas, which she thought was pretty darn interesting. And, you know, the homies, like all day long today, their hair is on fire, and they're going to cut off my lights, and they're always asking for feria, and I don't always have the feria. And some homie texted me, I just need $100 to completar mi renta. And I said, híjole, and I wrote him back, I said, just very simply, I didn't have the money, and so I wrote, things are tight. And I pushed send, and autocorrect told him, thongs are tight. And he wrote back, sorry to hear that. What about my rent, you know? So there I am in a car with two older vatos, Manuel and Poncho, and they're going to help me give a talk in Palm Desert at a high school. And we have our morning meeting at 10 minutes to 9, and thought for the day and the prayer and announcements, and we sing happy birthday to each other. So we finish the morning meeting, they get in the car. Manuel's in shotgun and Poncho's in the back, and we're 15 minutes on the road when Manuel gets an incoming text, and he reads it to himself, and he chuckles. And I said, well, what is it? And he goes, oh, it's dumb. It's from Snoopy back at the office. Well, I'd just seen Snoopy. You know, Snoopy gave me a big abrazo as the day was beginning. Snoopy and Manuel work together in the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of our workers, all gang members. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want it because occasionally, you know, gang member becomes attitudinal. And so I said, so what's he say? Oh, it's dumb. Hang on. Let me find it. Here it is. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now. Show them they got the wrong guy. Well, I nearly drove into oncoming traffic. We laughed so damn hard, the three of us. And then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we are separate, that there is an us and a them? Now you go from here, from PCP, and to the world, and you also, what did I say, PCP? PCC. How do you know PCP? To brace yourself to go into the real world, you will need PCP, especially the current world in which we exist. It's late. I'm usually in bed at this hour. So, but you go from here, and part of the thing is, service is a good place to start, and my sense of all of you already is that you're kind of connected to service, you know? And that's good. It's a good place to begin, but you don't want to end there. I mean, service is the hallway. You want to get to the ballroom, which is the place of kinship and connection. At Homeboy Industries, I'm not the great healer, and Adrian and Jesse are in need of my exquisite healing. The truth be told, we're all a cry for help. We're all in need of healing. It's one of the things that joins us together as members of the human family. And so you want to inch your way out to the margins and kind of approach it in a different way. You don't want the distance that comes from service provider, service recipient. You want to bridge that distance. And so you go to the margins with a different kind of perspective, a different kind of attitude. And you brace yourselves, because people will accuse you of wasting your time when you go to the margins. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. So you want to go out to the margins in a different way, not to save the day and to rescue people, but you want other voices to get heard. That's why you go. I was in Houston giving a talk, and a very earnest, hardcore gang intervention worker, former gang member himself, comes up to me after a talk, and he's working with gang members in the streets, you know, and he says, pleading with me, how do you reach them? Meaning gang members. And I found myself saying to him, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? And that's a whole different thing. Can you receive people? And that turns service on its head. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend, and he was the best listener I've ever been in the presence of. If you were talking to him, nobody else existed. He was laser beam focused, listening to you. He was never looking over your shoulder to see if someone more important was on the approach, like, here comes the mayor. No, he was just talking to you. And once, quite famously, a reporter had commented to him and said, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And Cesar just shrugged and smiled and said, the feeling's mutual. And that's exactly what we hope for. You go to the margins so that there is no distance that separates you between service provider, service recipient. You want to bridge even that so there is no daylight separating us. One of the homies that found more jobs in our entire 30-year history with more attempts than anybody else was a guy we all called Dreamer. He lived in the housing projects. I knew him since he was a little mocosito, and his older brothers got into the barrio, and he got in, and one of the smartest homies I've ever known, though I don't recall that he ever actually went to school, but you know, he's in his 40s now and doing well, married, kids, house, construction work. But in his early 20s, he was kind of a yo-yo. He was always in and out of being locked up. I'd find him a job in the private sector or at Homeboy, and I kept doing that over and over and over again, and always before too long, he'd gravitate to vague criminality, usually something involving drugs, the sale of or the use of, and then he'd wander back to me. So it was a pattern that was really quite frustrating. So this one time, he finished a 4-month stretch in county jail, a probation violation, and there he is sitting in front of my desk. And he says what gang members often say, this time, it'll be different. And I go, all right. So with him sitting there, I pick up the phone. I call a friend of mine named Gary, who's runs a vending machine company in Alhambra, and he's hired homies in the past. So I'm crossing my fingers, hoping against hope. Maybe he'll do it again. And sure enough, he does. He says, "You tell that guy he can start tomorrow." That's a holy man right there. So Dreamer began work the next day at the vending machine company. Well, 2 weeks later, there he is again in front of my desk. I couldn't even believe my damn eyeballs. I said, "Híjole, Madre Santa, here we go all over again." But this time he reaches into his pocket and he waves very proudly his very first paycheck. And he says, "Damn, gee, this paycheck makes me feel proper. I mean, my jefita, she's proud of me, and my morritos, they're not ashamed of me. And you know who I have to thank for this job." And I said, "Well, who?" And he looked at me strangely and he said, "Well, God, of course." I said, "Oh, sure, no, that's right. That would be God." "You thought I was going to say you." I said, "No, gosh, God's number one." He said, "You know, you are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days." I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, "Yeah, because God would have had struck down your ass already by now." Well, the thing I most remember was the two of us, we just fell out of our chairs howling with laughter. And I defy you to identify who's the service provider, who's the service recipient. It's mutual. So as Anthony mentioned in his kind introduction, Homeboy was born a long time ago when I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission, nestled in the middle of the two public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. At the time, it was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other, which is not typical of public housing, and making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity anywhere in Los Angeles was my parish. I didn't know that when I drove up. I buried my first young person killed because of the sadness in 1988, and I buried my 226th human being killed because of gang violence 3 Saturdays ago. Not all from that community, but I know a lot of gang members. I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school because there were so many junior high, middle school age gang members who had been given the bota from school, the boot, and they were wreaking havoc in the middle of the day in the housing projects. And they were writing on the walls, they were selling drugs, they were violent. So I walked out to them and I'd kind of isolate them one at a time. I say, "Hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go?" And to my surprise, every single one said, "Yeah, I would." And then I couldn't find a school that would take them. So that kind of forced my hand. So right across the street from the church is our parochial school, our elementary school, grades K to 8, which occupied the first 2 floors. But the entire 3rd floor of the building was the convent where the ninjas lived. And so I gathered all the nuns. They were 9 Belgian nuns. And I gathered them in the living room, and I sat them down, and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out, and we could turn the convent into a school for gang members? And they looked at each other, and they said, sure. And that was the extent of their entire discernment process. And so gang members came in large numbers to the church property, and that created a disconnect. People in the parish started to say, hey, wait a minute. Aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out? And I thought that was a good gospel challenge. And then the gang members started to say, if only we had jobs, so myself and the women in the projects, there were only really women with children. We marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. So we invented things, maintenance crew, landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of rival enemy gang members from the 8 gangs. And then in 1992, after the Rodney King verdict, the whole city exploded, if those of you were around to experience that. And every pocket of poverty ignited, except not my parish, which was probably one of the most likely to implode. So the LA Times wanted to know why, and I said, well, maybe it's because we had 60 strategically hired gang members enemies who had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before, and more to the point of this woman's question, a reason not to torch their own community. Well, the next day the article appears, and the following day I'm summoned to a movie producer's office in Beverly Hills. His name was Ray Stark, and he happened to have $500 million. And so he summoned me, and he says, how should I use my money? Well, I look back on that now, and I see I woefully undershot my request, but I was young. So I said, hey, why don't you buy this abandoned bakery? It's right across the street from the school. It's got ovens. It's all tore up. We could fix it up, and we could put hairnets on rival enemy gang members. They could bake bread. I don't know. We could call it Homeboy Bakery. And that was the extent of my entire business plan. And he said, sure. And so we were off and running. And so we baked bread. And a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we changed our name from Jobs for a Future to Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this project. And not everything worked. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. And nobody ever intends to do such a thing, but we backed our way. We've evolved our way now into becoming the largest gang intervention, rehab, and reentry program on the planet. We didn't set out to do that, but there you have it. So 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors, and the centerpiece is the training program that Adrian and Jesse both participated in, because it's a paid gig, and it's more about healing than anything else. One thing we discovered kind of 15 years into this, even after we printed the t-shirts that says nothing stops a bullet like a job, we discovered that an educated inmate may or may not, or gang member, may or may not go back to prison, or an employed one may or may not, but we discovered with a certainty that a healed gang member won't ever go back to prison, period. He won't reoffend, ever. And so we've moved from job-centric to trauma-informed to now healing-centered. And so it's a community of tenderness that holds folks so that they can find respite from their own chronic toxic stress and they can find a sanctuary at Homeboy, and then they become the sanctuary that they sought there, and then they go home and present that sanctuary to their kids, and suddenly, for the first time, you've broken a cycle. And so we have therapy, everybody's in therapy, and we have case managers and navigators, classes, all sorts of classes, like 60 classes at any given time in a course of a month. We have free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. We have a designated clinic, 3 laser machines, 1 paid physician assistant, but like 42 volunteer doctors. And it was all started because of a guy named Frank who wandered into my office. I never met him before, a gang member, 2 days out of Corcoran State Prison. He's sitting in front of my desk, and tattooed on his forehead, filling the whole space, big black block letters like a damn billboard. It said, "Fuck the world." And he looked at me and he said, "You know, I am having a hard time finding a job." And I said, "Well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one, you know." And in my mind, I'm thinking, where do I send him, you know, to McDonald's, you know? Do you want fries with that? No, I don't want fries. Mothers clutching their kids running out of the store. So naturally, I hired him, and he bagged bread for a while, and I found a doctor at White Memorial Hospital who chipped away at his forehead, and a handful of others. And the doctor had donated 1 hour a month to do this. And pretty soon I had a waiting list of 3,000 gang members who wanted this treatment, so we couldn't stay with that arrangement. Parentheses, Frank is currently a security guard at a movie studio in Hollywood, and there is no trace left of the angriest, dumbest thing he had ever done, proving once and for all that each one of us is a whole lot more than the worst things we've ever done. And so then we have all our businesses, as Anthony mentioned, cafe, we have the bakery, we have Homeboy Grocery, which is where we sell chips and salsas and guacamole, and all the Ralph stores in Southern California, and now all the Stop and Shop stores in 5 states on the East Coast. Silkscreen, merchandise. We have a restaurant at the airport, Homeboy Diner, the only place you can get food at City Hall. Homeboy Recycling, farmers markets, and Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. And they cater. It's kind of a who's who. If you go there for breakfast or lunch, you're going to run into celebs or stars or elected officials. Vice President Joe Biden came once with 2 hours' notice, and Jim Carrey is there often enough. Actress Jane Fonda was there last week, and Forrest Whitaker and Jack Black. And once, famously, Diane Keaton showed up for lunch. She's won an Academy Award and big movie star, Godfather movies, Annie Hall. So her waitress is Glenda, and Glenda's a big girl, been there, done that, tattooed, felon, parolee, gang member. She has no idea who Diane Keaton is, so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, "Well, what do you recommend?" And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that she particularly likes, and Diane Keaton lands on the second one. She goes, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good. And it's at that moment something dawns on Glenda. She looks at Diane Keaton. She says, "Wait a minute. I feel like I know you from somewhere. You know, like maybe we've met." And Diane Keaton sort of tries to deflect it humbly. "Oh, gosh, I suppose maybe I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before." And then Glenda goes, "No, now I know. We were locked up together." Yeah, that just took my breath away, and I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly Kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind, and if you'll permit me. Jesus looks out at the gathered and he says, that you may be one. It's about us, that there be no distance separating us, that there be no us and them, just us. You go from PCC to choose to become enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. There's that line in the Christmas carol, O Holy Night, and it says, long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Well, yeah, it's about Jesus and it's about Christmas, but how is it not the job description of everyone who goes from this auditorium? You appear and the soul feels its worth. Almost every Buddhist text begins with these sweet words, O nobly born, remember who you really are. I think that's what happens at Homeboy more than just about anything. You choose to be enlightened witnesses and you return people to themselves. At Homeboy, we're allergic to the notion of holding the bar up and asking folks to measure up. Instead, we hold the mirror up and we tell people the truth, that they are exactly what God had in mind when God made them. And then you watch them, oh, nobly born, inhabiting the truth of who they are, and the soul feels its worth. They become that truth, and no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out, and death can't touch it because it's huge. But at Homeboy, we know you have to reach in and you have to dismantle messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep people from seeing their truth. For the principal suffering of the poor throughout history is shame and disgrace. And it says in the Acts of the Apostles this odd sentence. It says simply, and awe came upon everyone. It suggests that the measure of health in any community at all, including this one here, the measure of health may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So I get invited to give talks, and some years ago I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia. And it was what they call a gang in-service. So they do this for social workers a lot, where they'll 9 to 5 in like a hotel ballroom, and they do different, aspects and workshops of gangs and how are you to help them and see them. And so I said yes, and I figured, I'll probably maybe give the keynote, or maybe I'll speak at lunch, or I'll close the day. So I said yes, and I bought my ticket. Well, a week before I was to fly, I pulled out the letter, and to my horror, I discovered that I was to be the only speaker all damn day, 9 to 5. And I said to myself, oh, hell no. So I invited 2 homies and trainees, like Adrian and Jesse, and named Andre and Jose. And they were like in their 9th month or so in our 18-month program. I sat them down and I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. 600 social workers. I'd like you to get up and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I'd never heard their stories, and so Jose gets up first, and he's like 25 years old, and gang member, been to prison, tattooed. But in his time, even the brief time at Homeboy, he had sort of gravitated, as one of his phases, we call it, to becoming a very valued member of our substance abuse team, a man solid in his own recovery, and now he's helping younger homies with their addiction issues. And apart from being in prison for a long stretch, he also had a long stretch of time as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasp. And Jose says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. And we got damn whiplash going back and forth. And then he continued, I guess I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walks me up to an orphanage and she knocks on the door, and the guy comes through the door and she says, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me, and my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school each day. First t-shirt, because the blood would seep through. And second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could recover his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. Because after all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is, if we don't welcome our own wounds, we may well be tempted to despise the wounded. Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. And the soul felt its worth. I'm going to end with this story, and then I'm going to invite Jesse and Adrian out here, and the 3 of us will answer some questions for you. It occurs to people sometimes, universities to force their students to read my books against their will. I'm not complaining. So one such university, Gonzaga University in Spokane, my alma mater, forced their incoming freshman class to read Tattoos on the Heart. And they said, would you come and speak? We're going to have a big venue, 1,000 people on a Tuesday night. Could you come up? And I said, sure. can you bring 2 homies with you? And I always say yes if people are going to pay for it, and I always pick homies in the same way. I always pick rivals, enemies from different enemy gangs who work at Homeboy, just to force them to share a hotel room together, just to mess with them. And I always pick homies who have never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing gang members panicked in the sky. It wasn't that long ago, I was at LAX with 2 older vatos, and we were flying to DC, and one of them, dead serious, said, "Hey, G, are we flying Virgin Airlines because it's our first time?" I said, "Well, actually it's a requirement, but we'll be coming home on American." So I picked 2 homies, and I've done this, oh my gosh, 1,000 times easily with men and women. So I pick Bobby, an African-American gang member who worked at the time in the bakery, and Mario, who at the time worked in our merchandise store. I've done this so many times, but I've never picked anybody more absolutely petrified to the bone, paniqueado, pero, than this guy, Mario. I mean, it was starting to freak me out a little bit. He was hyperventilating, like, and we hadn't even boarded the plane yet, and so we were at Burbank Airport, and a small airport, big bay windows, Southwest Airlines mainly, and big planes. But they don't have that hermetically sealed chute where you board the plane. You have to walk out onto the tarmac, like you're the president, and you climb the stairs that are at the front of the plane, and the big feature there are their steps at the back of the plane. So I'm sitting there with Mario, and Bobby's off walking somewhere, and our plane arrives. It's early morning, and people are deplaning. And I said, "Mario, that's our plane." And he looks at the plane, and he says, and I think, oh my God, he may die before we actually climb those steps, And so I see our flight crew arrives, the pilot, and there are 2 flight attendants, females, and both of them have very large cups of Starbucks coffee, and they're schlepping up the steps to board the plane. And Mario goes, "When are we going to board the plane?" I said, "Well, as soon as they sober up the pilots." There they go now. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. And I should tell you that in our 30-year history, I think Mario's probably the most tattooed individual who's ever worked there, which is saying a lot. He's all sleeved out, neck blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered in tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say "the end," so that when he's lying in his coffin, there won't be any doubt. So I'm walking him through the airport trying to calm him down, and people are like this, and mothers are clutching their kids. I'm going, wow, that's interesting, because if you were to go to Homeboy tomorrow and ask anybody there who's the kindest, most gentle, tender soul who works here, they won't say me. They'll think for half a second, they'll go, Mario. Yeah, Mario is. He works in the cafe now. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance at changing the world. So we get to Gonzaga, and they have the big talk Tuesday night, but what they don't tell you is they have like 1,000 other talks all damn day on Tuesday. And this class, this meeting, this lunch, all damn day. And so I tell these 2 guys, look, I'm not going to speak at any of these. I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom. You get up and talk. Well, they're nervous, especially Mario, but they do a good job. They tell stories of torture and terror and violence and abuse of every imaginable kind. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance. Otherwise, you'd get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. So we get to the nighttime venue, and just like Adrian and Jesse, the 2 of them spoke before. Mario in particular was quite terrified. I do my thing, and then I invite them out, as I am about to do with these two guys. And I go, yeah, question. Yes, ma'am. It was a bigger place than this. And yeah. And so she stands. Yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gates for Mario. And Mario is a tall, skinny drink of water, and he clutches the microphone, and he's just trembling. Yes. And he's just terrified. And she says, well, you say you're a father, and you have a son and a daughter. They're about to enter their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? You know, what advice do you give them? And Mario closes his eyes, and he's clutching the microphone. He's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's going to say. And when suddenly he blurts out, as soon as he says those two words, he rushes back to his closed-eyed, microphone-clutching refuge, and he's trembling. And now I know he's losing the battle with his tears, but he wants to get the whole sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands, and now it's her turn to cry. Why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving, you are kind, you are gentle, you are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 total perfect strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping, and all Mario can do is hold his face in his hands, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers had returned him to himself, and everyone standing and clapping, they were returned to themselves, which shouldn't surprise us because it's mutual. And the soul felt its worth. O nobly born, remember who you really are. And so you go from this auditorium eventually, and from the school eventually, and you create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it, where there is no us and them. There is no daylight that separates us. And we stand against forgetting that we belong to each other. And pretty soon you will cease to care whether anyone accuses you of wasting your time. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. You don't go to the margins to make a difference. You go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different. Thank you very much. Oh, there you are. You're down there. All right, so we won't keep you. I feel badly that you're here as long as you've been here. And so Jesse and Adrian and I will, and I guess they have microphones there. Hold that.
So if anyone has any questions, this on? If anyone has any questions, please come to the microphones
We'll just use this soon.
Adrian,
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Adrian and Jesse. This question is for Adrian and Jesse. Can you share what your plans are for after PCC?
Well, as for me, I'm getting ready to transfer out, and I'm pretty hopeful that I'll end up at UC Berkeley. So yeah, that's what I want to do, you know. I've always liked school. I never thought that today I could say I got a 3.6 GPA, but yeah, that's what I want to do. And major in sociology and be an agent of change.
As for myself, I'm in the same boat as Jesse. I just submitted my tag application to UC Santa Cruz. I'm gonna apply. Like I'm striving to go to universities like Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara, Davis. But at the same time, like I want to challenge myself and apply to institutions like Princeton, private, like USC, Stanford. Why not? So we'll see what's next.
This question kind of goes out to all three of you. I've been beginning to wonder throughout the entire talk, like I can't imagine like the hardships you guys went through with the other homeboys and girls. Like how do you get back from like a really like hardship or a big obstacle, and like basically like what motivates you guys to like get back up and fight?
Like when your friends were killed, what have been able to lift you back up again?
As for me, like I always knew that I was more than just a criminal, more than just a person that was causing harm, And I guess when my two best friends passed away, I felt like I was the third one, and I'm just tired of trying to survive, I just want to live. I want to live. I want to do it for those in my family that never really got the chance to do the things that I have done, and I just want to pave the way for others to be an example that it's possible, And it just takes a day at a time, I've been through so much things that I still deal with this on a day-to-day basis, but like Father Greg said, it's about healing and really tapping in and centering yourself. So yeah, I just want to live.
I think, like an individual like myself, like I'm not supposed to be here, statistically wise, I'm supposed to be either serving life in prison or dead. And being an individual that constantly, makes mistakes after mistakes, like I don't ever lose hope, because I always think about the next and upcoming homie and homegirl that are in the process of changing their lives. If I give up, if I just continue to throw in the towel, despite my first failure, then what example or how am I paving the path for them? But experiencing failure after failure and still being, not giving up, still being stubborn, that's what motivates me and gives me that drive.
This question goes to Father G. There has been documentaries about you, but have you ever thought about having a reality show like Pitbulls and Parolees? Hey, I'm not gonna lie. I mean,
A reality show like what?
like Pitbulls and Parolees.
Oh, Pitbulls and
Yeah.
Parolees. I don't know that one.
So it's like a dog sanctuary of pit bulls, and
Yeah.
she only hires parolees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to watch that. Yeah, we've been approached. I never want to do the reality show thing, because
Not a reality show, but just like a show.
Well, with a documentary, you can it's in the can and then it's in the world, But if you have kind of a show that's kind of in a continuing basis like that, then it's sort of, I don't know. I always have said no. We've been approached many times.
Really?
Like for example, the Homegirl Cafe. I don't know if you guys know this. They wanted to do Homegirl Cafe, and here's what they hoped for. Obviously, you already know what they want. They want the homegirls to be in the kitchen, look, bitch, and grabbing the hair, and that's what they want. And literally, they kind of talk, well, we'd like to kind of film them as they have conflict in the kitchen. I said, oh, hell no. So, I think
Or
it kind of
cookie show?
promotes mischief a little bit, you know. So, but there's a show that's sort of being developed at the moment. So,
really?
Yeah, but they've tried to do this for 25 years, you know.
Oh.
They've tried to do like a feature film, you know, but then it's kind of the, you know, the arc of that story doesn't make any sense to me, which is sort of the Great White Hope kind of story, you know, priests saving the day. So this current iteration is kind of more interesting to me, and we'll see if somebody does it. I mean, there's a team of writers and stuff who are writing this kind of little thing, and it's like a series, like a Netflix thing.
Oh, that's cool.
But fictionalized, you know. I mean, it's not a documentary, but it's, you know, yeah. Like Sean Connery would play me, and Brad Pitt would play Jesse, and on like that. Yes.
This is to Jesse and Adrian. Do you guys ever have moments where you feel like giving up? And if you do, what do you do in those situations? And what advice can you give to people, to, even in this crowd, that feel like giving up themselves? Maybe in, you know, different aspect.
You know, just on my personal experience, you know, man, like lately, you know, I've been thinking about it. Like I've been dealing with it. Like I deal with it all the time. You know, I always think about like giving up. I ask myself like, why am I here? You know, like what's my purpose? Why do I continue to try despite hitting failure after failure after failure? And every time I'm ready to throw in the towel, every time I'm ready to just block everything and everyone out of my life, I just get deep in prayer personally, you know, and I tell myself, you know what, don't give up yet, you know. There's just that hope. Like I didn't went from being homeless to going to prison to being out in higher education, and despite hitting setback after setback, I haven't given up. I don't know what's the reason behind it, but I do know that no matter what, I continue to go, because like I said, when I walked through places like Homeboy Industries, there was an older homeboy or an older homegirl that greeted me, and I want to be able to pass on that legacy. But I'm going through that through that journey of self-discovery. But it's for me, it's a journey. I just continue to fight against those feelings and have that hope, you know. So I always think about the generation that's coming up ahead.
As for me, man, I deal with that all the time. Exams, the applications, I want to give up all the time. I think about this constantly. You know, I think about, man, like I could just go back to drug dealing, what I was really good at, you know, but it's taking it a day at a time. If you start trying to push too forward or get ahead of yourself, then you start feeling overwhelmed, you know, and then it starts to become a ripple effect. And it's just taking it a day at a time and really centering yourself and really meditating and taking a deep breath, you know. And I know personally, like I said, when I was young, that's when I was like 8 years old, those were like my fondest moments, and I could recall as if my mom was still in front of me, and she told me, like, I want you to be a lawyer, a doctor, you know, and I just look back and I just want to fulfill that, you know. And I just think it's just little things like that where I just take it a day at a time, and if I can make it there, I belong there, you know, and that's just how I feel, a day at a time.
Obviously, I'm not a student here. I'm with East Los Angeles Women's Center, and everyone in East LA and Boyle Heights recognizes Homeboy Industry and the work that you've done. I want to commend the two young men for finding yourselves and hopefully, you know, creating paths for others, because that's how, when you talk about kinship, one helps another. But I just really wanted to commend you, Father G, for using social enterprise and the business model to create these programs. I know many of us that are in this field use grants, and we struggle with funding, but you have really paved the way for many of us to look at social enterprise for businesses to really create a way out of poverty, and I really thank you. I just want to thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you.
Yeah. I think a misconception, though, is that we're a $20 million annual operation, so half of that money in our budget comes from our 9 social enterprises. But there's a kind of a notion that somehow all of our budget is provided by our 9 social enterprises, and it's not true. So we have to raise $10 million a year, and it's a heavy lift, and we're struggling at the moment. And at the moment, we get exactly 0 government funding, which is outrageous because we're in the county of LA, and there isn't another place where more gang members go to get help. And so, we should be getting $5 million a year from the $935 million annual probation budget. And that wouldn't be commensurate with the services we deliver, but we'll take it. And that's frustrating, because if we were a shelter for abandoned puppies, we would have been endowed already. We would have had enough money. Seriously, we would. And that's true. Even though I get angry letters from puppy owners, I just think that sort of says something about us that we ought not to be very proud of. That, because they're tattooed and they're a whole lot more than the worst things they ever did, but it's a tough sell, but it's a safe bet. I think Homeboy has had a singular impact on public safety in LA County. Gang-related homicides were at 1,000 in 1992. And since then, they've been cut in half and cut in half again. And the last 2 sheriffs and the last 5 chiefs of police recognize that Homeboy has had, obviously, an impact on that number decreasing. Because we're an exit ramp for homies to kind of move beyond the violence. So, I don't know. It's frustrating. It's the only thing that keeps me awake at night is trying to meet payroll, and it's tough. But one day we'll reverse that,
I think you already covered a little bit of the question I'm going to ask. I wanted to ask, what do you think is the biggest challenge in changing the prison structure system from incarceration and more about rehabbing the individuals instead of just locking them up?
Solutions to mass incarceration.
Man, one of the solutions is education. I remember when I was in prison, a lot of the times I was in prisons like High Desert, Tehachapi, and because I was in a maximum security or I was in segregated confinement, that means that I wasn't entitled to an education because I was maximum security. But I remember when I would be escorted to medical, I would see other individuals with their books on their hands, and every time we would try to petition to seek an education, the people in charge of the prison system, they wouldn't grant us access because we were high risk. The only way we would be entitled to an education, it was if we debriefed and went to a special needs yard, or our points dropped within time. Years passed by, and eventually when we went to a less of a high risk yard where we were able to get an education. But other than that, we didn't have access to an education. And therapy, man, therapy worked out. That's one of the things that helped me out the most when I was at Homeboy Industries, when I was working there, and I started seeking therapy. But in prison, you know, you don't have access to therapy, let alone an education, you know, unless you're of minimum security. And I think when you start taking classes like psychology, sociology, it opens up your mind to your neighborhood, but at the same time to reflect internally, you know, self-help, you start growing within. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
So this will be one last question.
Hi, my question is for Adrian and Jesse. I was actually just curious, if you do sometimes like maybe keep in contact with people from the neighborhoods that you grew up in, and you see that those people, they are headed towards the gang route or they are gang affiliated, do you ever try to get them to go into Homeboy Industries, try to steer them more towards that path, or is that something that needs to be chosen for themselves? And if you do mention it to them or try to help them out with information regarding Homeboy Industries, are they receptive to that information, or?
A crazy thing is, an individual that we're associated from the neighborhood, he passed away in December. And there was a lot of individuals who were all from the same neighborhood, and they pulled me out to the side, and I kind of felt like I got in trouble or something. And they told me, hey, we heard you're going to college. And I was like, yeah. Where do you plan on transferring to? And I told him Berkeley. He's like, hey, Bear wants to talk to you. And I was like, what? Come to find out that he's actually a graduate from UC Berkeley. And he wants to help me out to make sure that I get there. You know, and nobody wants to be gang banging every day. If they could get a job or they could go to school, if they could have stability, that's what they want, you know. And a lot of these individuals, they feel like they're hopeless and nobody's willing to give them a chance. And sometimes, you know, I tell them and they grasp it, you know, but life hits. They got to pay the bills. They got to take care of their kids. And, you know, and some people, they want to take that chance and they really want to go forth it. And it might just be for the smallest thing, tattoo removal, you know, checking out the classes, but it's taking that step and just getting there, you know. So a lot of people do that I know that do want the help, you know. It's just at times it is a personal choice, you know, but as long as you're there and not giving up and telling them that, you know, you believe in them, then slowly but surely they start believing in themselves. Yeah.
You know, similar to Jesse, you know, when I joined the gang, I was 12. Within time, you know, I pursued that path of juvenile halls and prisons and whatnot. So when I decided to take a step back and work on myself, one thing that my homeboys told me, if you're gonna work on yourself, don't be a hypocrite. If you're gonna do it all the way, you know? So as I started my journey throughout time, now when they see me and they see the things that I'm doing, they get happy. But I had one individual, you know, and that was my homeboy Vago. And I remember it was a Friday, and he reached out to me, and he was talking to me, and he was like, you know what, man, I'm tired of this lifestyle. Like, I want something different. You know, I see you're doing it. You know, can you help me out? And I'm like, all right, like, let's meet up on Monday. I'm going to come. I'm going to pick you up. But if I'm going to pick you up, just make sure you're consistent. I'm going to take you to Homeboys. He was like, all right. So he never made it to that Monday. That Sunday, he got arrested, and he was charged for murder, and he got 60 years to life. So that's a little bit about my story. But when I do come across them in places like Homeboys, or whenever I go to the barbershop and cut my hair, when they see me, a lot of them, they get happy because they see, like, you know, like, you're still keeping your word. You're still doing the things that you said you were going to do.
So thank you very much for coming. I hope you all have been inspired by this talk and by the experiences of both Adrian and Jesse. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for staying. And I want to give a huge thanks to Jesse and Adrian, and of course to Father Boyle.